All right, and we're recording. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Human Behavior Podcast. I'm Brian, and of course, we have Greg with us as always. Greg, good morning. How are you doing there
Morning.
in Gunnison, Colorado?
Morning, buddy. It's a beautiful day, ready to go. Very
All
excited.
right. Well, today the topic du jour is what we're calling cultivating curiosity, and that's sort of what we're calling it, and what we're doing, and it's sort of what we do and what we talk about on the podcast, and what we train folks to do. And what we mean is, everyone gets into reading human behavior and trying to understand it, and they sort of already start at the at like an end state already, and we always like to wind that tape back. And you have to start somewhere, and then there's all kinds of different terms we use and other people use as well, like anomalies and incongruent signals, and then for the law enforcement folks we work with, what's reasonable suspicion, what's probable cause. And that's sort of a process to do, and that's it. All starts with being curious with your environment. And so, like, if there was always one takeaway that I could always teach people, or people always ask, like, hey, how do I get better at reading a situation or understanding human behavior? And I used to always say, just be curious with your environment, right? There's so much out there, and there's so many signals and things that are out there that we miss nowadays for different reasons. We're busy, with technology, everyone's curious on Instagram and social media, but they're not curious, when they're walking around outside at the mall or in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So we always like to say that's sort of like, I guess, the big end of the funnel is cultivating curiosity. So for today's discussion, Greg, I kind of want to get into a few of those areas, like, why aren't we as curious as much anymore as we used to be, maybe, but really, like, how do I cultivate curiosity? Because I even look at it like from my kids, right? How do I do that with the insurgent and now the terrorist? He's a little young, but I just want to cultivate that curiosity, and what that leads to throughout their life is whatever. But I remember I got one, I knew that I had been doing well with the insurgent when she was younger. She was probably like 6 or 7. And we were driving, and I was looking out the left window. I was looking for a place to park, and then she just goes from the back seat, is like, hey, that's weird. And I'm like, what's up, hon? What do you got? And she goes, oh, that guy's just got a sweatshirt on with his hood up, and it's really hot outside today because it was the middle of summer. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that is weird. That's not typical, something you see. And I was so happy because it was just her looking out the window and attributing value to this seemingly innocuous observation where most people would go past, because she was curious and go, I wonder why you'd be wearing that. That's not typical. And so I have no idea what the situation was, never saw the guy again or anything. It doesn't matter. But like, the fact that she had gone from this just being a little kid, because in general, kids are more curious with their environment because they don't know shit. They don't know anything, right? So when you get the head tilt or they're looking, they have to process everything. The things that we take
Yeah.
for granted, the things we don't even see anymore, they're still seeing. And it's so curious with everything. And now the little guy, Max, is at that stage where everything's whoa, and he points at everything, and oh, look at this, and makes these little sounds because he can't even talk yet. And so it's so cool. And I just mimic him. And then it's funny because he thinks like I know what he's talking about, which I don't. But I mimic it to really cultivate that, and that's what I try to do with humans, in general. So it always starts with that. So we'll deep dive what all this stuff means, and sort of that funnel analogy that I know you'll get into. But let's start with cultivating curiosity, Greg. And how do I do that? And why? And maybe even before that, why do I need to do that? What can't, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, what's the point, sort of?
So I already got a bunch of notes because you always start right in. I mean, you boot the door and throw in a flashbang and say hello,
Yeah,
and that's a great way to start any
yeah. Welcome,
thing.
welcome
So
to the party.
exactly. So tell the insurgent the only thing she has to change is the word weird to interesting,
Okay.
because it's the interesting
No,
is
that's a
just
great
a
point.
great
Yeah.
term. Okay, and then when somebody says weird. It's a lower level of somebody saying, "Hey, it's suspicious." Those are words we want to avoid because they pigeonhole us into a likely outcome when an outcome doesn't exist yet. We don't
So
have all the information, right?
that's a really good point, and I just want to hit on that real quick, because some
Yeah,
people, like, will kind of get us wrong on social media, or won't understand the context when they think they'll literally say, they'll comment in a video, oh, there's nothing suspicious about that. But if you go back and watch the video, we actually never said the word suspicious, but
yeah,
they put that in there. And so that's actually a great point, which is at the end anyway of that funnel. That reasonable suspicion comes after a whole bunch of other steps. So I know, I
yeah,
appreciate you
yeah,
bringing that
yeah.
up, and
No, no.
that's the weird, the odd, the different.
Yep.
I would say our, you know, view of what's typical, what's normal
Yep.
human behavior is probably much bigger than what most people's are. Where, where we're always like, someone's like, "Hey, isn't that weird? Isn't that?" And we're like, "No, that's just a fucking person being a person." But what we find
Which,
interesting is also probably greater than most people. So I wanted to
yep.
hit up with that, but I
No,
appreciate
no.
that.
So that led right into the second thing I wrote down while you were talking. Normal. The definition we use of normal is clinically typical. We're talking about clinically normal, what one should expect in this environment based on historical perspective, what type of environment it is the baseline financial, fiduciary, relationship, social, physiological. Okay, there's a whole bunch of those lists. And you said it correctly. And I'll get to it in just a minute. But you got to remember when people look at these, being odd or being weird doesn't mean that you're up to anything. Okay,
It,
we meet unique
well,
people
it's
every day.
it's normal. I mean,
It's
actually, it's
absolutely normal.
especially at certain points in your life. You know what I'm saying?
You
It
know
is,
me. You
yeah.
you know me, and you've known me for a long time. And if you classified me, I would guarantee weird or odd or
Yes.
unique
Yes.
would be in all of your
Absolutely.
descriptions. Okay,
Yes.
and that's okay. Look, you're so glad welled up that you're looking for an outlier, and you're not using incongruence as your guide. And what I mean by that is, we'll go all over curiosity, but might as well bring up your funnel right away, just so people can keep track. Get out your yellow pad for a second, and remember that we're preconditioned for everything in our environments based on fear. We were supposed to live a long time, so fear was the healthiest emotion that we had to avoid potential danger in any environment. So our curiosity was, we're born with the desire to learn and explore our environment, to seek out new experiences and knowledge. Our genes, our environmental influences drive curiosity. That trait is absolutely vital in our brain growth and our learning. And we have drugs like dopamine that are on to promote novelty seeking behavior, which means that we have to look at the unique, the novel, the unconventional sometimes, and go, hey, that's a better idea. That guy's got wheels. Homer Simpson, what a sucker. That guy has something to breathe for him. What am I doing wrong, right? I mean, you got to think that way, because
The
those
Iron Lung, yes.
those are fear-induced, emotion-based things, attributes, let's call them, that all successful human tribes possess. So if you have the lowest level, and there's obviously levels to the left and right of any fundamental hierarchy you build, but the very simplest way is to take out a funnel from your kitchen right now and hold it up in front of you, or on a yellow pad, draw a very simple funnel with a wide end and a narrow end. And then on the furthest left, the widest end of it, left for me, is my curiosity. Okay. So that's my environment. That's being generally curious in my environment, and wanting to seek out things that I'm not sure of. Then the very next thing is that drives me to interesting. Well, that's interesting. I've seen those before, but that one, that's interesting. I want to know more about that. And then as the funnel necks down a little bit, now we have anomalous. Well, that's a very unusual thing compared to these things in the baseline that rises above or falls below my baseline. Or it's exactly the bolo, to be on the lookout of things that I'm looking for: a person, a vehicle, a house. Then the next thing is, well, now I have what's called reasonable suspicion based on those things: the curiosity, the level of interest, the anomalies that are present. Okay. If I have three or more of those anomalies, I say, hey, guess what? Now I have a reasonable suspicion to protract, to increase my surveillance or observation, or go across and ask some perfunctory questions, right? And what does that lead us to? That leads us to probable cause. And somebody listening right now going, okay, wise guy, I'm not a copper. I don't give a shit what you are. If you're a
Right.
copper, or if you're a gosh damn housewife or a house husband, or
Teacher,
you're a teacher,
HR, a parent.
HR,
Yeah.
right? All of those situations, Brian, facilitate and necessitate us being curious. It's the healthy attributes that go along with it: challenging assumptions and beliefs, and asking questions, and being open-minded, and observing, and then analyzing, observing, then analyzing the world around you, investigating those conundrums, those mysteries around you, exploring them. That's what, first of all, keeps us safe. A healthy brain will aggregate toward, you must have it to keep that dopamine flowing, and dopamine will present itself to keep you curious. And it's a constant fight with age to remain curious, because the
Yeah.
problem is
Yes.
that we get
Yes.
older,
Yep.
Brian, and those effects dampen because we're convinced we've seen it all, we've seen
Yep.
everything, our unchecked ego. And then again, like we're constantly looking for a Gladwell guide, and that's twice I've mentioned Gladwell. Dude, I've bought every one of your books. I love almost everything. The last one blows. But the idea is that you rush flash to bang, you rush the judgment too quickly for how true curiosity occurs. Curiosity was on board, it waned. We need to get it back, and it has to be cultivated. It has to be taught and trained, or you won't do it naturally.
Yeah, no, and then that brings me to right back to the start of that funnel. So you broke down the whole funnel and how that works, and I appreciate it. And that's the thing, is it can be taught, it can be trained to be curious, because that's what a lot of people go, right. They want to go right to, well, what am I supposed to look for in my
Yep.
environment? What am I supposed to do? And people try to put out all these different things, or look for the van with the something in its windows and go knock on it, and
Knock
look
on
for the
that
kid
van.
with giving a hand signal. It's like, dude, a lot of that stuff is social media garbage, and
Yep.
it's fucking clickbait, and it's not even true, and it's BS. And I wouldn't go knocking on anyone's van. I would never give that as advice.
Not in
But
California.
anyway, but to be curious, this is why we talk about and give examples of doing the scavenger hunt, and saying,
I agree.
go take photos of things, and go find the feral cat, a cat hiding underneath a car, and go take pictures of ladders and shopping carts. And people are like, well, that doesn't make any, that's not going to lead to anything. It's like, no, that's how you become curious in your environment. That's how you get to learn to look into negative space. The feral cat does not walk down the middle of the street, showing its head, like, hey, I'm the boss here. Where does it go? It hides underneath cars. It goes in between buildings. That's negative space. That's what criminals
Yep.
have to do. That's what people who are trying to hide out, that know that their people are looking for them, act in that manner. So if I spot a feral cat hiding out in my neighborhood. One, if you, the other, well, if I can do that, I can find anything. But the reason we give you tangible things to look for and understand is because, guess what? You'll find them. And then your brain goes, oh, I get it. Ooh, a piece of candy. I'm now more curious, rather than just saying, look for the guy, kidnapping a kid. You're never going to fucking see that. You're not. The chances of you ever seeing something like that are astronomically small. But you will see a ladder. You will see a shopping cart where it doesn't belong. You will see a feral cat. So now I'm cultivating curiosity. Now my brain's going, ooh, I get this game. This is fun. I just
Yep.
won a little bit. I got a little dopamine. I want to keep playing. And you
Yep.
keep doing that over and over again. And then you're going to get to the point where you're going, oh, wow, that's interesting. Oh, shit, there's a dope deal going on in the Home Depot parking lot right now, and I got my kids with me. I'm out of here, or
Yep.
whatever the situation is. Right. The idea is, if those are all the pre-event indicators, those are the how I do that. And so when we talk about those things, it's not as a joke. It's not as a, oh, that's a funny story or that's amusing. It's like, go do it. And once
Yes.
you see those things for what they could be, once you see a ladder for something that gives you access, and criminals need access, not everyone carrying a ladder is a criminal. In fact, almost none of them are. In fact, the criminal usually steals the ladder from somewhere or comes across
Exactly.
it and just uses it because it's in the environment. But the whole
Right.
point was, if I don't attribute value to that non-standard observation, I'm never going to do that. And that's how we cultivate that curiosity.
Yeah, millions and millions of screwdrivers are created each week, and a small, virtually insignificant number of them are used in homicides or burglaries. But that doesn't mean that you should discount it when you see it sticking out of somebody's back pocket walking through the mall. You understand that now, and
Yep.
meaning that the people that are listening to you, do you understand what Brian just said? Brian just equated a scavenger hunt with not just understanding the principles that we teach in class in the modules, but demonstrating that you can do it on your own. Because it goes right back
Yes.
to Brian. I love cars and fishing when I'm talking about the Perndle and the gosh damn warning
Yeah.
lights on a car. And I talk about fishing, how to learn the etymology of the stream that you're fishing. Well, the scavenger hunt is that fly fishing experience where now you show me by choosing the right leader, the right tippet, the right lure, and catching that damn fish. And I don't give a damn how big the fish is, Brian. I give a damn that you followed loosely or exactly the principles that were bestowed on you, that transfer of knowledge, and you were able to utilize it. And guess what? I know that if you catch one, or even if you get a bite, even if you get one that breaks the
Yeah.
water, man,
Yep.
that you're going to want to
You're
do
hooked
more of
now.
it. Yeah,
Yep.
literally and figuratively, right? And the idea is that those aren't negative outcomes. Those are all positive conditioning things for your brain, because once you teach your brain where's Waldo, your brain will love that forever. And the problem with teaching a person a deliberate standard, here's the things to look for, is you're excluding all the things from their life, their historical perspective, their biases.
Yes.
Those can be healthy
Yeah.
things. We want, and we use cultivate. We didn't come up with a word just in happenstance. We're sitting on a shitter and we go cultivate, and yell it out to Brian. The idea is that how do you prepare the ground to plant a seed and have it grow. And then once it grows, how do
Yep.
you keep it alive and nurture it? And that's exactly what this is. Look, we are intellectually lazy now. And social media has put its foot on the scale, and it's going to be long time before it comes off. Laziness caused by decreased level of motivation is a simple way of thinking of it, but the lack of interest is the deadly part. And the lack of interest leads to a lack of confidence, which means that you're not going to continue searching your environment or being curious. And that's a teeter totter again. It's so
Yeah.
dangerous.
I
And
I
what's that
see.
caused by? Overstimulation,
Right.
excessive external impulse, excessive distractions, all of which we can accredit to television, social media. Do
Well,
you have any
that's
idea how much time we spend doing useless shit?
yeah, well, that's part of the that's part of why social media, works so well, is because it's seemingly very interesting, even though it's all a
Yes.
lot of it's 90% of the same stuff, just in different form. But it's the same thing. It actually sort of hijacks that part of your brain where you
Yes.
used to have to do that out in your environment, and and now it's doing it. So it's not that it's not that the thing is bad. It's just we're wired for that, and
Yep.
so we this now takes over instead of something else in our environment, right?
I got a perfect example of that. So yesterday you stymied me. I was gobsmacked because you were talking about Missouri and we were talking about one of the operations that we've got going, and we've always already got an operation going in Tennessee. And the idea was, well, Missouri touches Tennessee, and I'm sitting there in my mind, I've got the globe, and then I've got the map of the United States, and then I've got the 50 states, and I'm going down. I'm going, how the fuck is he telling me that Tennessee borders Missouri? Well, it does. It's really tiny. Okay, but I never considered that, because when I was playing with the blocks as a kid, putting the states where they fit,
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
Kentucky, then Tennessee, then we come
and
down to
yeah,
Georgia and Florida, and I never went west with that mind and said, oh, these are the states that go around. I do it with Colorado, because there's a place
because you have
called
this,
Four Corners,
yeah,
and it's
you're in that area of the square
a
states, so
square. You know what I'm saying? So it was much easier. But that's exactly what we're talking about. So what happened there, Brian, is you said that, and my intellectual curiosity kicked off. That's amazing, because we both learned something from that. You learned I'm geographically an idiot, and I learned that, holy shit, Tennessee touches Missouri. And you're going, okay, so what? So what? We have no idea the cornucopic effects of all of that accumulated knowledge and experience, because we can't compare stuff if we don't have stuff with which to compare it. And that's what this is all about. This is about, like again, going back to that suspicion. Anybody that thinks that manner, kiss my ass. That's not at all what we're saying. As a matter of fact, we're never saying that the stuff that you find is going to be illegal. We're saying that you can determine
yeah,
dangerous or opportunistic in your environment by conducting
yes,
observation, and not just observation and perspective, or perception, but a perspective that's unique by training you in a manner of organizing the way that you see things. So we're not teaching you what to look for, we're teaching you how to look. And that's the critical difference.
yeah,
And it's scientific, and it's supported by your brain and your brain's chemistry, and it's supported by every scientist that's ever walked the face of the planet. So stop trying
yeah,
to fight it.
and
Accept it.
and so that's what, I guess the next sort of part of it would be,
Yeah.
we talk about curiosity and cultivating curiosity, and then what a lot of people ask, which is a great question, is, well, what is interesting? What do you guys find interesting? And it's not
Right.
a specific list. It's always
No.
something in the environment. It's something that Yeah, but technically, Greg, it is kind of, we do have our own lists of things that we find interesting. There are certain things that
And they
based on
differ.
our experiences, yeah, but and then some are shared. Some aren't my
Yep,
experiences, but I learned that from you, or some aren't your experience, but you learned that from me, or just like
exactly.
whatever, or learn that from whoever or wherever. But those things that we find interesting, and so that's a great one. That's a great question. Is like, well, what am I supposed to find interesting?
Yep,
And so I'll let you answer that, but I'll put it this way: is like, it's something that, it goes back to that using incongruence as a strategy. It's something that doesn't fit based on my past known. So what
yep,
I can unpack there is whether it's the license plate from a place that, doesn't typically come here or something like that. Like when I was a kid, someone told me when I was a little kid that, the U-Haul trucks, how they always have some like state or something painted on the side, and it's like, oh, Missouri or
yep,
Louisiana or whatever, and they got like a little image on there, or they used to. My what someone had told me when I was a little kid is like, oh, that's where that truck is coming from. And I was like, oh, okay, like that's cool. And then I saw one, we were on like, I-80 on a family road trip, somewhere, and I see one from Hawaii, and I was like, well, that's weird. Like, how did it get here from Hawaii? So I'm like asking my
exactly.
parents, like,
That's
how did that U-Haul get here from
curiosity.
Hawaii? And they're
Exactly.
like, well, of course, they're like, what the F are you talking about? That's like, I was
Yep,
like, well, you can't drive across the water. Do they ship the truck? And they're like, they have no context where I'm going. But like, obviously someone was just messing with me or whatever. But the whole thing was like, oh, that's interesting. Now I can't give you a list of all of those things, but I do find like, you know, open car doors are interesting to me.
yep,
Broken glass is interesting
yep,
to me. All of those little things in the environment. But it really is. If I could put it in a big bucket, it would be pocket lint. Pocket
yep,
lint is always interesting to me. Trash on the ground is, because I want to know what kind of trash that is, because it tells me what activity is going on here. I want to know how long it's been out in the sun for. So it's like,
yep.
I can't give a full list. So I want to throw to you to go like, what
Oh
do
my
you look
God.
for, or how do I look for those things that are interesting, or what's interesting to you, Greg?
Yeah. So I was heading to the Warren police station at dawn. So whatever time dawn was, and it was in the summer when schools are out. And I was stopped at a light on a road called Hoover that was right by the fire station, and I could smell the fire station. Firemen are the best cooks on the face of the planet,
Yeah,
and they also have the best gyms. But they were already cooking barbecue. And I'm not a fan of barbecue, but I love the smell of barbecue. It gets me in all the right places, right? So I'm
yeah.
thinking about that, and I'm looking at the light, and across from me is the only other car on this early Sunday morning in the middle of gosh damn summer. And there's four middle school age kids, maybe early high school age kids, sitting in a white Dodge Diplomat. That's how old I am. And on the side of the white Diplomat, it says Sterling Heights School District. Okay. Now I look at that. Now, Brian, if anybody's even mildly paying attention to what I'm saying, there's at
Yeah,
least five or
yeah,
six things there that were very interesting to me. What are
yeah,
these kids doing up this early on
yeah,
Sunday in the summertime? What are they doing?
yeah,
Are they the representatives from the school? We don't use buses now. We
yeah.
individually give the kids the thing. So, of course,
Cars, yeah,
I wait for the light to change. I do the U-turn in behind them, hit the red and blues, and it's off to the races. So the idea is that to develop curiosity is the first step to develop reasonable suspicion or probable cause. And so you have to roll tape all the way back and take a look at things and go, that's interesting. Literally, I'm saying, say those two words when you look at something that you can't immediately explain away. So the example of the insurgent taking a look at the person that was overdressed for the
yep,
situation is way too hot for that. She should point at it and say, that's interesting. And you're saying, you really point at it? Yes. When you're learning, that's the best thing to do for your brain because now your brain gets it. Oh, where's Waldo? I got it. That's what I want to do in future encounters. And guess what? Those things fall by the wayside when you get much more experience and you become a subject matter expert. But Brian, when we see a person take the stairs rather than the elevator, okay, is the
yeah,
elevator broken? Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying, well, the person wants fitness. Well, I'm going to prove that. I'm going to be the person that goes up and
That's
goes, hey, why are you taking the damn stairs instead of the
That
elevator?
no, that's
Right?
actually I wanna hit on that
Yeah.
example real quick
Please.
because, that's something I do, and, like, you typically at every hotel we stay at, it's just part
Yep.
of my, like, movement, like, I like rather than taking the elevator and I wanna take the stairs so I don't get to work out as much when we're on the road, and you know who else takes the stairs? Fucking no one. Go into the stairwell of a hotel and it's
Cleanest
like
place.
pristine. Like
Yep.
it's like, "Oh, did you put new carpet in here and not anywhere else?" It's
Yep.
like, "No, no one's ever stepped on it because people don't use the damn
Yep.
stairwell." But that's a great thing and what you went down of how you articulated everything you saw that was off with the kids in the car for all that reason, but you of course started with the context, the baseline. This is the time
Yep.
of day, this is when it was, and then this. So what you're doing is you're saying this is why I found those things interesting,
But I
but
was equally
it
as
kind of
interested in the barbecue. That's the key. The
yeah,
key is
yeah,
that I
yes,
was
yeah, yeah,
interested
yeah,
in
and
my
was fighting for
entire
your attention,
surroundings,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So that and that's the thing is, and that's where people want to get those lists of things to look
No.
for, and those don't work, but those are things. What I do like about those lists is like these are things you should find interesting.
Yep.
When someone comes in and they've all of a sudden clean shaven, new haircut, and they've never been like that their entire life. Well, yes, that's
Yep.
interesting because that's a novel observation. And so when it comes to those lists, and because you just you articulated it while you were sitting there, but that's what those lists are good for. Here are some things to find interesting. But everything you talked about was you started with, man, it was this time of day. It was this is the location I was at. This is what nearby. This is what I smelled. This is what I saw. And then all of a sudden this thing comes up. So it's like if you had started with I looked at this vehicle and I saw that like it would have taken me listening to the story a much longer time to go why is this relevant, but when you laid out
Yep.
everything that was clinically normal typical for that day and time, when you just laid out that baseline, as soon as you saw, even when you said four younger kids in a car already before you even got to the type of car and what was put on the side, like I'm already going like what are they doing up that early on a Sunday,
And
where are they
exactly.
going, like what's
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
like
Tell
no
me
one
more.
does that. I mean, you
Right.
do, and but what everyone wants to do is then, well, it could have been anything. They could have. It's like yes, that you're right. Sure, but this is why it's interesting to me. This
And
is
it became
where I
more
have to start
interesting
from.
than the barbecue. It became more interesting than thinking I was going to check out of my scout car and go over to the fire department and see what latest hoax they were up to gain money or to get people to love them. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so let's go
everyone
back to
loves
that.
firemen.
Oh, they
So,
all love firemen. Let's go back to that the elevator versus the stairs. So equally, I find your observation being profoundly accurate. So the elevator or the stairwells are in pristine condition, and the only other time that I find people lingering is when they're smoking. They're clandestinely smoking. They can't smoke in the room. There's no smoking allowed on the property. They don't have a designated smoker. The weather's bad outside. So what do? They go a floor down or a floor up and they try to smoke a little bit of their cigarette and they go back. And you can smell that. And sometimes it's not a cigarette, it's one of those special cigarettes. But the idea there is that you're not necessarily looking like if you're a cop and you're listening to this broadcast, yeah, can you use this to find criminality? Of course. If you're a soldier, can you use this to find terrorist underpinnings? Of course you can. But what we're saying is just being curious in your environment. It like people say being situationally aware. Okay, you have no idea what that means, first of all, so stop using it. Second of all, you read it somewhere in a book, said that's good, and now you made a business out of selling that to people. I would much rather you stop and slow down and teach people how to be curious. Even mildly curious
yeah,
will increase your survivability in any environment. I'll give you a
any
quick example all
situation,
the way back to
anything.
Iraq. So I'm in Iraq and I'm part of a convoy, and I don't want to be in the convoy because I'm better out on foot. But we got to cover more ground, and the sniper rounds are pinging off, and we stop at one part of the city, and a guy's on the bino, and he goes, "Bring up the profiler." Honest to God, Brian, it was one of those situations, right? So I come up, and this is all new to everybody, but they're trying to push me out, say, "Show me your magic." And so they look and they see this ant trail, we used to call it, the dirt going from left to right across a street that the first MRAP is about to poke across, right? And so the idea is, it's command detonated IED, let's go another way. And they go, well, how did you make that assumption? And I'm like, what else could have caused that dirt in a row across this residential street. There's no gardens on either side. There's no agricultural business here. There's nothing that somebody would have bumped into. Like sometimes when you go across a bridge, for example, dust or something will fall out from the bottom of that bridge.
Oh, like a
Even
dump truck even, like, when it hits a bump and it, like,
sure.
it
So
yeah, you
there's
know
a
what I mean?
depression in the
Yeah.
road, and now it's dropping stuff off. A ceiling fan that hasn't been used in a while, when it starts, it's
Yeah,
going to
it
drop
starts,
dust off.
yeah.
Okay, well, none of those things were in the existence. And they go, "Well, can you be sure?" I go, "Fuck no, I can't be sure." But I'll tell you what,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm not
I'm a
going.
lot more sure than you are. And the idea is, I'm not going down there. Okay, and so finally, what they did is they sent out their EOD guys, and they go, "God, this guy's remarkable." I'm not remarkable. I'm unique in the manner that I let my curiosity be my guide, and that goes to interesting. And when interesting is there plus anomalous behavior, Brian, that door is already shining open, and it's a woman or the lady or the tiger. You remember those things back then?
Yeah,
It's the adventure book where I go left or I go right, and if I go left, I get hit by the meteor, so I don't want to go left. And the idea is that's the same thing. Is that a cell phone or a gun on that guy's belt? Okay, that's interesting. But you know what's more interesting? Why is that guy checking his six before he goes into the 7-Eleven? Why didn't he come with a car and he came from behind the building when everybody else is coming from the gas pumps? Do you understand how that builds? So now
yeah,
my
yeah.
interest is peaked. And when my interest is peaked, I stop orienting to the rest of my surrounding. I orient to the thing that's interesting, and I increase my perception and observation skills on narrowing the field of things that I want to pay attention to, because I only have so
And
much attention. And
eh
those things always have paid out in my entire career and made me
yeah,
more successful than other people.
and so let's sort of hit on when, curiosity or interesting goes too far is when we try to
Yeah.
create or establish some explanatory storyline, which is what your brain wants, but we go way off the reservation. I mean, you just did it with that one where you went, well, how can you be sure? And you're like, I fucking can't. You can't
No.
until something happens. You can't be
Yes.
completely sure. So that's why
Schrodinger.
it's like
I got to
it
open the
right.
box, right? The
Yeah.
simplest answer, and
And
we're talking about curiosity here, and cats are very curious. So think back to
yeah,
Schrodinger.
well,
Unless I unpack more, I'm not going to know. But is the juice worth the squeeze on that one? And you know the simple answer is
well that
no. We're a bunch of people in a row,
and
ready to drive over a bomb. Come on.
and this is where if you have the tacit knowledge, it can certainly help. It just reminded me of that when we were down in Florida with those the law enforcement officers down there,
Yep.
and the one officer, she was with her husband who's also police officer as well, but she had a great story from at like I think it was a store, it was like a big grocery store kind of thing, but she saw a guy when they were outside and he had a backpack on, and if there was, I don't know, something about him caught my attention. He went into the store, so my husband went in, I stayed out in the parking lot, and sure enough, like, he calls me and is like, yeah, he's running out right now, he's got a bunch of stuff, right? He went in there and stole some things and ran out.
Yep.
And what it is she, like most people, even with a lot of experience, couldn't quite articulate what it was, because it wasn't the kids after school who all walk in with their book packs on and get a Coke and get a candy bar, get whatever, and then leave. There was something different about this individual walking in with an empty backpack, and I was like, yeah, he was exhibiting mission focus. He was checking his six. He was looking, like, all of those different things, because he was very situationally aware, because he was about to go commit a crime and he knew people, he didn't
Exactly.
want to get caught. So sometimes it's articulating it, but it was great, because she was like, oh, look, it was just interesting to me, and I was like, yes. And you couldn't prove it, like, she couldn't go up and say, hey, I know you're about to go in there and steal something. Well, technically you
She
can,
did
you
prove it though.
could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
but she
and
did she
and
did
she could
prove
have
her
intervened,
hypothesis.
right?
Yeah.
Of course. And so okay, so there's two things there, and there's both important to discuss. And Brian brought them up, so I'm going to just dovetail on what he's saying, just to make sure that you add emphasis to it. So, are there any downsides to curiosity? Yeah. Excessive curiosity can lead to risky behavior or privacy invasion. So make sure that you're in
let's
the right
let's
place at the right
stay
time. Like,
let's
for
stay out of
example,
let's stay out of my life for
well,
this one.
my thing is like a hotel room door. Whenever I see one that's open and I don't see that people are cleaning the rooms around there, I'm very interested,
Right.
right? But what I don't do is I
Yeah.
don't knock and go in and go, "Hey, do you know your fucking door's open?" You know what I'm saying? I don't want to get shot in the bean, right? So the
Yeah.
other thing is that I have to understand that the only negative outcomes that I can predict will come from the conflict arising. Are you saying I'm a criminal? Are you saying I'm, and that's better left to the professionals that can de-escalate that. Store security, like Shelly and I at Walmart, probably, you know, at least once a month, have to go up to somebody and go, "Hey, do you have security on detail? Because this guy's fleecing you. He's back here right now doing whatever else." Those are interesting things that occur to us because we're more in tune with our environment. And let me go down a couple of things that Brian talked about. First of all, when you don't establish reasonable suspicion before probable cause and you don't test your hypothesis, what you get is a situation last week where the teenager was shot returning the plasma gun. I don't know what this new plasma gun is. I'm assuming it's some sort of paintball gun or a less than lethal thing that kids play with, like a pellet gun kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he was returning it to the store because there was something faulty with it. His dad literally waiting in the parking lot with a running car, Brian, and he goes in and security guard shoots him. Okay, well that is where you're so hyper alert that you go flash to bang without any consideration or potential de-escalation in it. Now, somebody out there is listening to me and going, "Yeah, the kid did something stupid." Yeah, he did, but learning curve shouldn't have cost him his life. You get what I mean? So there's, the dad is already feeling horrible. The kid had no ill intent. So you can accelerate a situation needlessly. Last week, and I'm not going to go into details for attribution because it's a sore spot with me on this caper, but they had a check on the welfare that turned into an armed entry. Three cops were shot and the suspect was shot. Okay, a check on the welfare turning into that, something's wrong there. Your curiosity was waning while
It got the
your
best of you.
probable cause was booting a door, and you think you had
Yeah.
all the reason for it. So I'll give you one more, Brian, and it's directly what you're talking about. I joke about the Ring camera all the time, and folks, the Ring camera is more likely to
Yeah.
catch you cheating on your spouse than it is a porch pirate or a whatever pirate they call them now. But the funny thing is that Walmart's my favorite place to catch shoplifters. I do it just to keep on edge, sharp while we're traveling. Brian and I have to go in. We grab a couple of things, and I'm always the last person out to the car with my peppers and apples because I'm going up aisle to aisle, seeing who's fleecing the joint, or if I can find the security. That's fun to me. But one of the things that I do check is the security camera footage on people they've arrested, or when they say, "Hey, we're looking for this suspect," because people repeat behaviors, and I like
Yep.
finding them too. The one thing that I noticed, Brian, that's ubiquitous on the camera feed is the people on the ground are completely aware of the people around them, going to the end cap, peeking around to see if they're being observed, going down to the end, leaving an aisle for a minute to go check something out. But guess what they're oblivious to? Minutes in, they forget that there's cameras recording everything. And that's funny to
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
that shows a lapse in curiosity based on the advancement of technology that we don't think about those things. We don't think about the ATM camera, and the person that has got a camera to protect their garage and their belongings is also filming you sneaking up and doing the homicide.
No, and it's another example of kind of when you're in that moment, you're sort of, you're in, the fight or flight, but you're kind of going primal, and so you only go with what you know and what you can see, and humans are very, vision focused, and that's how we process a lot of
Yep.
information, and you're not used to ever having to look up for a predator or prey. I mean, you're
You're
just
looking for the
always
person that
looking
may
down and in.
tackle you.
And
Exactly.
so that's the funny part is that's why you miss those things.
Yep.
That's a great example of all those behaviors, and that's another thing that what's interesting is one of those things we do is like, all right, well, next time you're at a mall or a
Yep.
big location that has security, try to find the security guards, find the plainclothes security
Yep.
folks. What would that look like? What would that Well, it's not unlike finding the criminal in a sense too, is because they're looking around, just looking at different things for different purposes.
Yep.
But that's the whole thing. And it's actually easier now today with because so many people are just glued to their phones and we're down and
Exactly.
in. And there's so much competing for our attention. It's actually, the whole cell phone thing is, and smartphones have made it easier to spot people because most people are down and in. And
Yep.
so it's one of those things. It's again, it's hard to give a list of things that we find interesting. It always depends on the environment and the context and your own past experiences. But there's that sort of caution in there of not letting our curiosity, what was it? Curiosity killed the cat, right? But
Yeah.
maybe that's what happened to
Sadly, I know
Schrodinger's
enough
cat.
about that. That's what you should call the episode, but I know too much about that. No, but
But
you're spot on.
but
Go ahead, please.
No, let me yeah, just finish that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
thought is that if you let that curiosity run wild, then it has those negative consequences. And that's
yeah,
why we have to go, all right, you saw something, either continue your observation or let it go and continue on and remember it. And people are like, well, not everything has to be explained. Some things are
exactly.
just odd and out of place, and you have to be
They're interesting.
okay. But
Right?
you have to be okay with not knowing the full story. It's
Curious
like the
can go
guys
to
who
interesting and never go any further. And that's why
yeah,
it's a
it
funnel. Do you get what I'm
no,
trying to say? Because it can go
but that
either way.
the beauty of that is that it's you're constantly doing it, so there's always something to be interested in. There's always something out there, and if you cultivate that, like you're just be constantly doing it, and that's how we develop that operating system running in the background. And I love
Right?
talking about topics like this because this is something anyone can do. Like, you don't have to learn our entire lexicon and go to our course. Now, if
No,
you want to testify and you want to get really good at it and you want to be able to make great observations in very, very
come on in.
complex,
Buy the book.
situations, like, yeah,
Exactly.
you want, well, yeah, you're going to want a leg to stand on and understand the science behind it. But
Yep.
I just everything the examples that we gave are things you see in everyday life. It's like I
Right.
do even with the insurgent when she comes home from school and she doesn't immediately go grab a snack and something to eat, instead comes up to me. Well, that's interesting to me because
Right.
that's
Where
not
are we?
what
What's
she's
going
hungry
on?
at the end of the day. Like, what,
Exactly.
she's got something on her mind, whether it's good or bad or something, but it's enough for her to come contact me. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Or she's got
interesting.
something
And
on her
it's like
stomach and
such
she found a couple of bucks and she had a burrito on the way home. Whatever it
yeah,
is,
that's
it
what I mean.
doesn't
She
have
got the
to
ice
lead
cream
to a
at the
specific.
ice cream truck,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
So
So, but the idea is that curiosity is what starts each one of these paths, and it doesn't mean that you have to go the whole way to probable cause. It doesn't mean that you have to complete a detailed explanation. So, back to your point that you just made, and again reinforcing it. So, find the most dangerous place at your local Walmart. Everybody out there, you got a Walmart. It's not going to be a very far drive. So, go in, buy yourself a cup of coffee, and what I want you to do is go back out and look at the wall that you're about to walk into through the opening doors and see how many cameras. Count them: 7, 8 cameras on the parking lot. What does that tell you about the parking lot? Now, if there's 15 cameras or if there's two, that should tell you something too. And I shouldn't have to walk you by your hand to understand what the number of cameras increased in that location would mean. Then walk just inside of those doors and take a look at the cashier counter, the exit doors. How many cameras do you see there? Now, go over by bicycle or by kids' toys or by dog food. I'll venture to guess you're not going to see a lot of cameras, but go over by tobacco or cigarettes or medical supplies, and you're going to increase that. So if you're trying to determine opportunity or the likelihood of a threat, Brian, you can use those indicators in your environment if you're even mildly curious. And the curiosity killed the cat. The funny thing about that is it's been around forever. So not only can you go all the way back to the ancient Greeks who revered cats, and then
yeah.
Mesopotamia and everything else, but earliest part of literature, the 1598, there was a play by Ben Jonson where they talked about it, and the cat meant the idea of saying that term meant care, not curiosity, killed it, but caused care in the cat, which meant sorrow or worry. The cat was worried about what it saw. It saw things that not everybody saw. And later that same year in 1599, Shakespeare, in Much Ado About Nothing, takes that same thing and uses it now as curiosity, killing the cat. That cat went a little too far, went into that environment where it shouldn't have been. And the great thing is that while it meant now being overly inquisitive, that's not how it started. It adapted and modified with the times. So why do we talk about feral cats? Because them feral cats get everywhere. And if I can find a feral cat, I
Yeah.
can find a shoplifter. If I can find a feral cat, I can find a gun on a suspect, using an alley rather than walking down the main street. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about curiosity
So
leading me into places I don't normally want to go or wouldn't
so
normally
then
go.
if when I find these things interesting, then when does it rise to the next level, or when does it continue down that funnel, I guess? Like, how do I
Yeah.
determine whether or not it's anomalous, and an
Yeah,
anomaly just being something
you're right,
something
because
that doesn't fit the
anomalies and next.
situation, something that's there.
Yeah,
Well, it's something that's there that doesn't belong, or something that's missing, and so and an anomaly isn't a list of things. Again, it's anomalous to that specific situation at that
right,
given time, right? The four
right,
kids in the car, at that time in the morning was anomalous from what you typically see at that intersection on that
exactly.
day at that time typically, right? So but how do I get from that to that next level that we're talking
Yeah.
about? Because a
So
lot of people, again, like listening, they don't care about reasonable suspicion or probable cause, even though it's a great, it's a great term to use.
yep,
And it's a great way to look at it, because you're developing artifacts and evidence, you're developing sort of your decision making as you
yep,
go. But how do I know when this is anomalous? Well, how do I know? Like, we gave all these examples that went from interesting to anomalous. Like, and the way I would look at it before you answer is sort of like, okay, well, what's the relevance of this sort of observation? What does it mean in this given context? And then you can kind of determine whether that's anomalous or not from there. Does that sort of make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense. So people ask me all the time, why are there 6 domains? And I said, because 5 wasn't enough and 7 was too many. And then they laugh for a minute and they go, no, why are there 6 domains? Because when I'm walking through an environment, I can only remember a certain number of things. And because they overflow into each other, 6 is plenty of lenses with which to be curious and change that level from curious to interesting. Now I use incongruence as my guide, as a filter for those fewer things that I'm looking at, and I look for anomalous, context dependent anomalous. And now what that does is that dumps me a
What
much
y-
smaller
what
group
it,
of things to look at.
Can can you kind of explain what you mean by that sort of context dependent anomalous?
Yeah,
Because again,
yeah.
like I don't want to overcomplicate it for people, but also
No,
want
no, no,
to
no.
to know that it is, when you're using what we're doing is we're doing comparisons, and we're using
Yes,
comparative baselines. It's this is relevant for this reason. So I have to have two things. I can't
yep,
just have the thing that I'm looking at. I have to have a comparison for it, right?
yep,
But that's how your brain processes information anyway. Like, everything is a
exactly.
comparison to some known in your life.
That's
So
why you need to come to a class so we can
what
fill in
is
all those other things, or buy the
what what
book, right?
what is the known here compared to
Yeah,
sort of that unknown? And that's how I
yeah,
do it. Like, and I think for a lot of folks, it's they want to know more, or they want to, um, you know, this is where you fall into those sort of fundamental attribution errors, and you get into this. Oh
yeah.
yeah, now look at the shirt that they're wearing. They're likely doing this, and they probably came from this house.
No,
And this is where all the astrologers come in and go, yeah, and they likely drive this type of vehicle because they were. It's like, no, you can't determine any of that. Just go
yep,
off of the situation right now. So I think a lot
yeah.
of people get kind of confused in that. And so, what do you mean when it's like this context dependent
So
anomaly
it's really
thing? Like,
funny that human
it's
behavior profilers that are all over the news and the media and write the books are 100% on their predictions when the person's already in custody and the police
yeah,
have the
after the
evidence and
fact.
they did the trial. So if you're watching me, or if you're not, if you're watching me, just watch what I do with my hands. If you're not, pick up 2 pens, pencils, beer cans, whatever the hell you're holding right now. Hold one farther away from you than the other. Now, line up the one that's closer to your face so you can see the other pen. I'm holding a blue and a red pen or item. Okay. That's what Brian is talking about. The known is the one in your right hand closest to you, the unknown is the left. Well, that's not enough. What you now have to do is you now have to put that against a baseline, an environment, a context. So in a library, I'm not likely to see a person playing the tuba. So that would be interesting to me. I would have to find out, is it, tuba appreciation day at the local library? If I'm watching an Elton John concert and the people that are standing directly in front of me are using marionettes to act out each part of the song, that's something I've never seen in my life. So that's interesting to me. So I would say, hey, you dope smoking marionette motherfucker, what are we doing? And I
I would
apologize for
say,
my
give me
language,
give me
but
whatever you're on,
yeah,
because
exactly.
that's
Well, I got the contact buzz. But the idea, and I apologize about the language because sometimes it feels pedantic talking about this, but the idea is that what we're doing is we're making a series of comparisons. And the comparisons are going to drive my interest level up or down. And then anomalies are going to say, I have to go further. So stop just looking for dope or guns. look for incongruent behavior. And if I have incongruence plus anomalous behavior in an area, then I know that I'm onto something. So, have you ever watched the person in a store? So pick a store. Walmart's a good one. A city market or a grocery store is a good one. Airport's a good one. Okay. And what you do is try to determine which people just today, while you're there, are overwhelmed, which people have had enough, which are ready to blow, whose cups are full, and prove it. The two favorite words in English language, prove it to me. They're sweating, they're sitting down, they're on the phone, they're shaking their head. People are offering them food or drink and they're saying no to it. They're not sitting in the chair, they're literally sitting on the floor. You get what I'm trying to say? The feet are both active and tapping, whatever those things are. Now, what about somebody lost? You ever see a little kid in the store that goes over to check something out and turns around and mom's not there or dad's not there anymore? And now they're looking and the search gets more and more frantic. Well, those are easy ones because what I can do is I can say, are they looking for something or are they looking for someone? Did mom or dad send them for the cat food and they're just checking the aisles? Or are they starting to panic because they haven't seen that mom and dad with the stroller and now so Brian, what happens is curiosity develops in me an interest. And that interest then develops in me what's a likely storyline or what's the likely outcome of this scenario that is playing out in front of me. And then I can decide to say, hey, kid, are you lost? That's a good way to figure out if somebody's lost. Hey, can I help you when somebody's overwhelmed? And no matter what my just being a good human. See, this is the great thing is curiosity is like lifting weights, but for your brain, it's a way to do what you're already naturally designed to do to sense fear and sense make your environment so you don't get into shitty situations. So now let's say that you get to the point where you go, wow, this behavior is very interesting. And I'm seeing anomalies based on the environment, the context which I'm in. And you know what? I'm going to tell somebody. And who do you tell? Well, it might be the front desk clerk at the hotel because at check-in you notice something suspicious in the parking lot. Or Brian, it might be 911 on your phone and hovering that finger precariously over that last one. And what's that? Well, only you'll know. Look, we can teach you when to do something. It's always
Right.
best to call 911 before you need it. I'll repeat that. Okay. Calling 911 and saying, hey, this is probably nothing. Okay. But I'm seeing this go on is that thing where now you can go back to and go, I was wrong. But guess what? I was wrong 3 times. And the one time I was right saved a bunch of lives. You know, you're not trying to put somebody in a trick bag, Brian. We're not trying to
Yeah.
besmirch somebody's integrity. What we're trying to say is your
Well, the
behavior has risen to a point where it's interesting to me among thousands of people I see all day long. And it never happens.
and the decision you make is obviously dependent on what your role is in the
Of
situation
course.
and who you are and what you're there to like, and that's what you're responsible for. That's very different.
Yep.
We can't get into that. No one can make that decision, unless you are the person there in the environment. You know that you
Yep.
can't come up with, oh, here's what to do,
Yep. But
unless
we
it's a
could
very
we could give
specific
a framework.
context.
We could say, hey, it should be
Yeah.
legal. We should say it should be ethical. We
Yes.
could say that morality should be your guide, but we certainly can't say in which instance you should do more or less. Of course,
And no one can. That's the complexity
not
part, that's
for
the
me.
hard part, but that and everyone wants that, "Well, what do I do?"
Yep.
Well, you can only say that in so many specific situations. Like, I can teach my kids, "Okay, in these situations, you're going to call 911 immediately. You're going to hit the panic
Yep.
button on the alarm at the house, like when these things occur." But there's that gray area where they don't know. So I have to teach them, well, when like we had to get a bunch of things like inspected here at the house for some of the stuff, and like, where they come out with like a test to see if you have, gas lines or wherever on the property before you dig anything, that kind of stuff, right? And so it's like, well, you know, when someone's at our house on our property taking photos of the house, you should probably come tell one of us. You know what I mean? It was
Exactly.
like,
That's interesting.
and that's
Yep.
interesting. So
Yep.
like, the insurgent got all scared and locked the doors and thought it was weird, but like didn't say anything. And I was like, hey, okay, like when these things happen, like, but you can't go through an entire list. So I look at it as, what would you teach your kid to do in that situation? And you teach them to, well, yeah, get an adult. ask someone else, go ask for help. So how is that different than most of the situations you're going to run into in life in any of these?
Yep.
And you can
Yep.
ask a bystander, you know what I mean? Like you're pumping gas and you see something odd going on, the person right on the other side of the pump, you can enlist
Yep.
the aid of others and say, hey, this looks a little odd to me, what do you think? You know, and that's the whole thing, is it doesn't have to be, everyone wants the simple answer, and I see so much of that out there. It's like, well, you know, that's when you're going to come in, and I'd rather be, you get the stupid sayings, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. It's like,
The only
okay,
people
you're
that have ever
you're
said that
fucking real
are the ones that are
slow.
in a holding cell ready to go before the
Yeah, I
judge,
know.
Brian, you know?
I know.
So,
It's
yeah,
like
I
that's a
agree.
it's a very simple way to look at the world. Like,
Yeah, if I
gosh, I
see that on
wish
your bumper sticker, I'm
I'm
not
just a,
parking near you, by the way. You know what I'm saying? I'm
yeah,
not gonna
yeah,
get any eh,
few
look,
more head injuries, and I'll be right there with that one.
one thing
But
I love about
you
you
know, and
is that you play against role and you're actually a very good parent. So Father's Day just means that you're a sperm donor, right? But being a
yeah,
real father is a much more important standard. You know that I think highly of you as a dad. I think highly of Sean Clements as a dad. Nico, who just had a baby with Bailey, I know he's going to be a good dad. Why? Because the things that we instilled in them when they were young, Shelly and I would be walking around in any situation that we were with the kids, and we'd say, always be looking for cover. And then we'd show them what cover looked like. People laughed at us in the stores and didn't understand what was going on. Always be looking for an exit. And we'd show them what an exit looked like. We'd be in a store and we'd walk through those pushy doors and show there's an exit that's back there. And then somebody would come up and go, you can't be back here. Yeah, thank you. And we'd go, but we would show them how to find that exit and then always be considering de escalation, the ABCD. We still use that today in class, Brian. Look, this is a situation that I don't think is tenable right now. So I'm going to increase my chances of survivability to be nice, de escalate the situation, and get the F out of Dodge, and then consider doing something else. Those are so reasonable, and they're the flip side to curiosity. With curiosity means that somebody, a real good criminal, a real good terrorist, is going to notice you in the crowd being more curious than somebody else. That raises the likelihood of them targeting you
yeah,
and going, "Holy
they're
crap!" So
yeah,
right? So these go both ways.
they're less likely to actually, yeah, that's the thing, is that, you know, those criminals are looking for that low hanging fruit for something
You're
like
right.
that, and they're going to go with simple, and you just, you know, it's the example of putting the sign on your lawn saying this property protected by whatever. You sort of, whether or not you have an alarm system,
Yep.
you get rid of that, the bottom, you know, the bottom dwellers. You get rid of
Yep.
the people that go, well, that house doesn't have one, so I'm going to go there. Now, if
Yep.
someone really still wants to target you, are they going to? Well, of course, but that's with
Right.
any situation.
It's a different level of
It's,
intent too. Yeah. Exactly.
but it's, and it's, so it's like you're playing to the numbers on this. Like, how do I keep that lowest group
Yep.
away? And yeah, when you're looking around and you're seeing these things, like, people pick up on that and they're like, all right, well, I'm not going near that guy because
Right.
he's all over me.
Victim or opponent, right, Brian? I
And
mean, that's an
and it
important
also
standard.
and it also tells you if someone still is coming up to you and they notice that you're doing that, well, that's a different opponent that you have right there. That's
Now
someone else that
attentives
you have.
raised
Yep.
up, and now we're at that reasonable suspicion, probable cause. So out in the driveway, I've got a metallic sign between the two doors, and nobody ever comes up. Sometime a UPS or a FedEx, but we don't get many visitors for good reason. And
Yeah.
right on it, it says, "Forget the dog, beware of the wife," and it shows a picture of Shelly just
Yeah.
beating the hell out of me, And one day, one of the UPS drivers goes, "Hey, is that true?" And I go, "Oh yeah." That you don't want to
Yeah.
mess with that. Nobody messes with Shelly. And as a matter of fact, Shelly is on the fast call the call list. Whenever anything goes crazy, people are always calling Shelly. Hey, I'm seeing this. What should I do? And I find that hilarious because who do they want to go to? They want to go to the Rock. They want to go to the person. When you were
Yeah.
talking to those two coppers,
Because
Brian, the husband and wife down in Florida, their
yeah.
blood pressure never raised above a level when
No.
they said we
No.
were interested in this and that. We're not talking about being hyper alert here, Brian. We're not talking about burning a
Well,
lot of calories, right?
yeah. Shelly will kill you while she's still drinking her coffee and never
With
even
one hand
change.
without spilling the latte. She's just, but the
And
photo is
you'll
so funny because I love it and it was never meant as an insult. And you can see people
it,
go, oh, that's degrading to your wife.
well,
I
you
go, have
get
you met my
more,
wife?
you
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 know?
have more, like, you have more elk and wild cats showing up at your house, and you have people.
Absolutely.
So,
A fox yesterday, which drove Java nuts. Yeah, we don't have a lot of people up here, but I want them to know too, you know. And
yeah,
the idea with the curiosity is being mildly curious is so easy. It's such a low hanging fruit, a low caloric intervention that why don't you try it? And you know what? If you bought
yeah,
that funnel and you mark it up, or if you got it on a yellow pad, send us a photo so we can take a look and see that you're doing it right. And you know what? Post that photo on your fridge, and over the next couple of days, you won't have to anymore because you'll assimilate that information. You'll be doing it as part of your daily routine.
yeah. That's a good one. It was the Home Depot parking lot yesterday for me. It was like, what are these
Oh
people doing
man,
creeping around between cars? And then they were selling. They had their little hand truck with crates of strawberries on there that they were selling, so
didn't
you
mean
could
it
buy
was
fresh
illegal,
strawberry.
but
Like,
it meant it was
no,
interesting, right?
yeah, well, and then they were hiding out because it was still sunny and hot. It was late afternoon, so they're hitting the shade of their pickup truck, and then they
There you
go
go.
around
They
as
were
people got
being
out of their
shady,
vehicles. Well, exactly, and they
right?
had it was the same thing if you were gonna go up and rob someone in the parking lot, it was the same exact behavior, but they were just trying to sell
Yeah.
strawberries, so
And
I got 50
rarely do
pounds.
do
I got
people
50.
carry strawberries and guns at the same time. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
well, I got 50 pounds of play sand and a crate of strawberries
There
yesterday
you
at
go.
a phenomenal deal. I love that I get to do that here, but
That's yeah, not so much here, by the way. It's
yeah.
still 35 to 40 degrees every morning, but
Well,
it ends at 90, so I've got that going for me.
so all right, so we covered a lot, and you
Yeah,
started. I just kind of reiterate the funnel concept. You start at that big end of the funnel, and then you work your way down, and some things will go all the way down there and go, yep, here's where you are, but most things kind of just never get below that
nope.
top layer of the funnel. They
They'll
don't ever
plug
make
it
it
up.
down.
Think about a big water balloon, right?
Yeah,
They'll plug it up near the curious or the interesting and won't go down any farther. But think of something like a BB or a pellet or a marble. They'll go through those first layers and continue all the way to the narrow end. And if you have a graduated cylinder, it's the same thing. At the top, the lowest level, the lowest caloric intervention is always curiosity. And why not start there? It's like our admonition about the parking lot, dudes. If you
yeah,
want to increase your survivability, pay more attention in the
yeah.
parking lot.
Go hang out in those big parking lots, those Home Depots, the Walmarts, all that
Yep.
stuff. You'll see more in a day than you've had like your whole life. It's a
Amen.
great place to do it. All right, well, we covered a lot, and hopefully we cultivated some curiosity with this episode
Wow.
and got people looking and thinking. But we'd love to hear back from everyone. You can always reach out to us at the Human Behavior Podcast at gmail.com, and then obviously we have a lot more on the Patreon side, and those folks will happy to answer your questions. And we're going to do some of the webinars where we can deep dive sort of some of the concepts, and you get some more content on there, so you can go use some of the lenses that we talk about in
Yep.
class. We're trying to chunk that up in very digestible ways that are kind of practical that people can use. So you can find all that stuff on the Patreon site. So I don't know, any other last words there, Greg?
Very briefly, for the love of God, get yourself a textbook. It's all in there. Second thing is Brad Pitt in Seven. What's in the box?
Yeah,
That's what I think of when I think of Schrodinger. And
yeah.
this entire cat analogy throughout this has been Schrodinger for me. So
Okay. Well, no, there we go. Well, thanks everyone
what's in
for
the
tuning
box?
in. Yeah, don't don't forget to open the box and look inside. No, don't forget that, that training changes behavior.